The Kreth admiral had 37 years of command experience, and he had never lost a battle he did not choose to lose. That was the distinction he made in his mind every time someone brought up the 7 engagements that had not gone his way. He had not lost them. He had chosen different outcomes: strategic withdrawals, tactical repositioning, the careful conservation of force that separated a commander from a gambler. His record was not perfect because no record worth having was perfect. His record was honest, which was rarer and more useful. His name was Admiral Vale Corrin, and he was standing on the bridge of the Kreth command carrier Absolute Certainty on a Tuesday morning, looking at a tactical display that had stopped making sense approximately 4 minutes ago, and he was applying the same honest assessment to his current situation that he applied to everything else. The situation was wrong. Not wrong in the way that battles went wrong, where the wrongness was visible and had a source and could be addressed. Wrong in the way that a room felt wrong when you walked into it and did not immediately know why, and then spent the next several minutes identifying what had changed. 4 minutes ago, the tactical display had shown exactly what it was supposed to show. The Kreth fleet, 41 warships in formation, closing on the outer boundary of the Maren Trade Corridor. The conquered monitoring station at the boundary, which was a small installation, lightly armed, staffed primarily with civilian analysts and a token military presence that the conquered maintained for political purposes rather than defensive ones. The approach had been textbook. The formation was clean. The Absolute Certainty sensor array was running full coverage and returning clean data on all 41 Kreth vessels in formation, and nothing else of consequence in the corridor. Nothing else of consequence. That was the phrase that had been true 4 minutes ago and was no longer true now, and the distance between those two states of affairs was what had made the tactical display stop making sense. His tactical officer, Commander Sera, was a woman who had served under him for 9 years and who had developed, over those 9 years, the specific quality of someone who did not bring him problems before she understood them. She brought him problems when she understood them, at which point they were no longer problems but situations, and situations had responses. He valued this about her above almost everything else. Commander Sera was standing at the primary tactical console, and she had not spoken for 4 minutes, which told him she was still in the problem stage. He gave her 2 more minutes. At the 6-minute mark she turned around. Her face was the face of someone who had checked their work 3 times, and the work kept coming back the same way, and the same way was not a way she had seen before. She told him, "Admiral, I need you to look at this." He crossed to the console. What the tactical display showed at the 6-minute mark was not what it had shown at the 0-minute mark. The corridor, which 4 minutes ago had contained 41 Kreth warships and 1 lightly armed conquered monitoring station and nothing else of consequence, now contained something else. Not one thing, not a small thing. The sensor return was resolving slowly. The way sensor returns resolved when the objects being detected were large enough that the array needed time to process the full scope of what it was looking at. The returns were coming in from multiple vectors simultaneously, which meant the objects being detected were not in one place but in many places, distributed across the corridor in a pattern that his 43 years of tactical experience recognized as a formation. A large formation. He looked at the numbers as they resolved. He looked at them the way he looked at things that required looking at before he could trust himself to speak. Then he asked Commander Sera the only question that the display had not yet answered. He asked, "Where did they come from?" She told him, "I do not know. The corridor was clean 4 minutes ago. Full sensor sweep, all frequencies, no returns except our own formation and the monitoring station. Whatever this is was not there 4 minutes ago." He said, "Things do not appear in corridors." She replied, "No, Admiral, they do not." He looked at the display. The formation resolving around them was conquered registry. Human ships. The transponder returns were coming in now as the sensor array completed its assessment, and each return carried the identifier codes that the Concord's military registry used for its vessel classes. He knew Concord military vessel classes. Every Kreth commander knew them. The assessment briefings were thorough and regularly updated, and he had read every revision for the past 20 years because a commander who did not understand his potential opponents was not a commander but a liability. What the transponder returns were telling him did not match the Concord military vessel class database he had read for 20 years. Not because the returns were false, because the database was incomplete. Commander Sera was running the same comparison he was running. She ran it twice. Then she set down the query tool with the careful deliberateness of someone setting down something they do not want to drop. She told him, "Admiral, I am looking at vessel class designations that are not in our registry. 17 of them. These ships are not in any intelligence file we have been given." He told her, "I know." She told him, "There are 63 of them." He said nothing for a moment. She continued, and her voice was the voice of someone delivering accurate information regardless of what the information felt like. "And Admiral, they were not here 4 minutes ago. The sensor log is clean. No approach vector. No faster than light entry wake. No transit signature. They are simply here." He understood then what he was looking at. Not the ships, not the formation, not the 63 vessel returns with the unfamiliar class designations. He understood the 4 minutes. The 4 minutes was not the time it had taken the ships to appear. The 4 minutes was the time it had taken his sensor array to see them. The ships had been here before that. He did not know how far before, because his sensor array had not been looking at the right thing, had not been calibrated to detect the specific signatures these vessels produced, and had therefore been returning clean data on a corridor that was not clean. They had not appeared, they had been seen. That was the difference, and it was a significant one. His communication system activated before he could speak. The incoming signal was Concord frequency, military band, command channel. It resolved into a voice that was human, female, calm in the way that people were calm when they had prepared for this specific moment and had been waiting for it to arrive. The voice said, "Admiral Corrin, my name is Fleet Admiral Sera Vane, Concord Combined Defense Command. I want to have a brief conversation before either of us does something that is difficult to walk back. Are you available?" Vale looked at the tactical display. 63 vessels in formation around his 41. The unfamiliar class designations. The 4 minutes. He opened the channel. He told her, "I am listening." Fleet Admiral Vane's voice was not the voice of someone who had just won something. It was the voice of someone who had been waiting to have a specific conversation and was now having it, and who intended to have it correctly. She told him, "I want to start with what I think you are currently processing. Your sensor log shows a clean corridor 4 minutes ago. You are now looking at 63 vessels that were not in your registry. You are wondering how that is possible. I am going to answer that question because I think you deserve an accurate answer, and because we are going to have a better conversation if you understand what you are looking at." He said, "Proceed." She said, "The Concord has maintained a reserve fleet capacity that is not reflected in the vessel registries that Allied and non-Allied intelligence services have access to. This is not deception in the military sense. It is a policy decision that was made approximately 40 years ago and that has been consistently maintained since then. The decision was made because the Concord assessed that the public visibility of our full fleet capacity was not necessary to maintain the stability of our treaty relationships, and that maintaining that visibility carried costs we were not willing to pay." Vale sat with that for a moment. Then he asked the question that the answer produced. He asked, "What costs?" Vane's voice remained level. She told him, The cost of maintaining a fleet is proportional to the threat that fleet is designed to address. A fleet that is visible produces visible threats that justify the fleet. A fleet that is not visible does not produce those threats, because no one is building against a capability they cannot see. For 40 years, we have maintained our full capacity without showing it, and for 40 years, the outer corridor threat environment has been significantly more stable than it would otherwise have been. The calculus has worked. Tonight, you are seeing the consequence of the calculus working. Vale looked at his tactical display. 63 ships, unknown classes, 40 years of a policy he had not known existed. He was a man who valued honesty in his own assessments. He applied that value now. He told her, "You are telling me that the conquered chose to be underestimated because being underestimated was strategically preferable to being correctly assessed." Vane replied, "Yes, that is an accurate summary." He told her, "And tonight you are showing me the fleet because something changed in the calculus." She replied, "Yes." He looked at the tactical display. For a long time, Commander Sera was watching him. She had the quality of someone who was processing the same information he was processing, and who had arrived at the same place, and was waiting to see what he did with it. He thought about 37 years of command experience. He thought about the 7 engagements that had not gone his way, the ones he thought of as chosen outcomes rather than losses. He thought about what it meant to be a commander who prided himself on honest assessments. He was sitting in the middle of the most significant intelligence failure of his career, and it was not a failure of his intelligence service. His intelligence service had done its job correctly. It had assessed accurately what was visible. The failure was that there had been 40 years of capability that was not visible, and the absence of visibility had been a choice by the entity that possessed the capability. And that choice had been made specifically because showing the capability would have changed the environment in ways that were worse than not showing it. He had not lost the assessment. He had been given an incomplete dataset and had assessed the incomplete dataset correctly. That was not a failure of command. That was a different problem. He opened his mouth to speak, and Fleet Admiral Vane spoke first. She told him, "I want to tell you one more thing before you decide what to do next, because I think it is relevant to your decision. We have had this capability for 40 years. In 40 years, we have used it twice, both times for defense of non-conquered territory, both times at the request of the territory being threatened. We have never used it for territorial expansion. We have never used it as leverage in a trade negotiation. We have never shown it to a Creth admiral in a corridor as a threat." He asked, "Then why are you showing it to me tonight?" She told him, "Because you were 12 minutes from the monitoring station, and the monitoring station has 411 civilian personnel, and my orders are to protect them. Showing you the fleet is not a threat. It is information. The information is, this corridor has never been undefended. You are the first person outside the conquered to know that. I am sharing it with you because I believe you are the kind of commander who makes better decisions when he has accurate information, and I would prefer you make a good decision tonight." Vale looked at the tactical display. 63 ships, 40 years, 411 civilians, 12 minutes behind him. He thought about his honest assessments. He thought about the 7 engagements that had not gone his way. He thought about what he was actually looking at, which was not a trap, not an ambush, not a demonstration of force designed to humiliate him. He was looking at a conversation between 2 commanders, one of whom had just shown the other something she had been carrying for 40 years and had never needed to show before, and had chosen to show it now instead of using it, which was a specific kind of restraint that his 37 years of command experience recognized as something rarer than victory. He made his decision with the specific clarity of someone who had assessed the situation honestly, and found that the honest assessment pointed in one direction. He told her, Fleet Admiral Vane, I am going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. She told him, that is the only kind I have available tonight. He asked, if I had not turned around, what would have happened? She was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she told him, I would have moved the formation between your fleet and the station. Nothing else. We would not have fired unless you fired first. He said, and if I had fired first? She told him, and her voice was entirely level. Then this would have been a different conversation. He sat with that answer for a moment. It was an honest answer. He recognized honest answers when he heard them. He told Commander Sera, all stop, hold position. She gave the order without hesitation. 41 Kreth warships came to a full stop in the outer Maren Corridor. Then Vale opened the channel again. He told Fleet Admiral Vane, I would like to continue this conversation. Not tonight, officially, with the appropriate parties on both sides. Her voice carried something in it that was not quite satisfaction. It was something quieter, the quality of someone who had prepared for this moment hoping for one specific outcome and had received it. She told him, I will arrange it. Admiral Corrin, I want you to know something before we close this channel. He waited. She told him, in 40 years, you are the 3rd commander who has found out about this fleet in a corridor. The first 2 chose differently than you did tonight. He said nothing for a moment, then he asked, what happened to them? She told him, they are not a topic I discuss. He understood. He had understood from the first moment of the conversation that she was not the kind of commander who made empty statements. The fleet around him had never needed to show itself because the ones who found it had made calculations, and the calculations had either gone the right way or they had not, and Fleet Admiral Vane did not discuss the ones where they had not gone the right way because those outcomes were not ambiguous and did not require discussion. He turned to Commander Sera. He told her, log this engagement as a diplomatic contact, Category 1, not a military incident. She looked at him. Her expression was the expression of a woman who had served under him for 9 years and who had developed the ability to read the space between his words. She asked, and the fleet admiral, what do we log about the fleet? He thought about that for a moment. Then he told her, log it as confirmed, update the registry, all 63 vessels, all designations, everything the sensor array captured. She asked, and the assessment of threat level? He told her, none. She looked at him. He explained, and his voice was the voice of a commander who had just received accurate information and was adjusting his assessment accordingly. A fleet that has existed for 40 years and has never been used for territorial expansion is not a threat. It is a deterrent. There is a difference, and I should have known to look for it. Update the registry. Flag it for command review. And Sera. She waited. He told her, make a note in the log that the Conquered did not show us this fleet. They told us about it, voluntarily, before they needed to use it. That distinction belongs in the record. She made the note. He looked at the tactical display one more time. 63 ships in a corridor he had entered expecting to find nothing of consequence. He had been right that the corridor was not empty. He had been wrong about why. He had been given accurate information, and he intended to use it correctly, which was the same thing he always intended, and which was, tonight, going to produce a different outcome than any of the 7 engagements he preferred to call chosen results. He had not lost tonight either. He had learned something, which was rarer and considerably more valuable. He told Commander Sera, set a course back to Kreth Command, standard speed. We have a report to file and I want it accurate. She entered the course without a word. The absolute certainty turned in the outer Maren Corridor, and 41 Kreth warships followed it, and behind them the corridor settled back into the silence that corridors settled into when nothing was happening that needed to happen. 63 ships that had never needed to fire. 40 years that had never needed to show itself. One conversation that had gone the right way. That was the whole of it. That was always the whole of it. The galaxy had assumed the conquered had no fleet because the conquered had never shown it. The conquered had never shown it because the showing was never the point. The point was the conversation that happened when someone finally looked close enough to find it. And that conversation tonight had gone exactly the way Fleet Admiral Vane had prepared for 40 years for it to go. She closed the channel. She looked at her tactical display. 63 ships in formation, and one Kreth fleet retreating at standard speed, and 411 civilians at the monitoring station who would wake up tomorrow without knowing that tonight had happened. She thought that was exactly right. She logged the engagement. She went back to work.